They tell her to smile for the cameras like she hasn't been smiling for herself for years. The chandelier catches the light and scatters it across the marble floor, turning the grand ballroom into a cathedral of glitter. Family friends clink flutes and murmur congratulations the way people murmur over the price of a painting. Loud enough for everyone to hear, soft enough to be polite. She stands at the end of the aisle in a dress that cost less than the cake, a dress she chose because it made her feel like herself. Simple, clean lines, a veil that lets the light through. Her hands fold in front of her, knotting the tiny nerves into something manageable. He smiles at her with the kind of practiced warmth that comes from rehearsed love, and for a heartbeat she believes in their future. Then she sees them. They aren't hiding it. They lean in, whisper into each other's ears with that sharp, satisfied tone people use when they think they have the world figured out. Her dress is not the problem. Her dark skin is. A titter. A smirk. The groom's mother, pearls clipped tight, lifts her chin, as if the very color of her daughter's-in-law's face is an intrusion. An uncle clears his throat and says something about family image, as if people are accessories. The vows go on. Her voice trembles at first, then finds itself. He promises everything. She keeps her promises too, something she believes in like a religion. But the room is full of eyes that are not seeing her words, only cataloging her. One cousin makes a joke about dressing down for a family wedding. A bridesmaid assures herself that the bar isn't low, it's selective. After the ceremony, the photographers push through the crowd. Someone lifts a champagne glass and the room toasts to their perfect match. But beneath the clatter of silverware and the hum of small talk there is a low current of disrespect. It surfaces in offhand comments, in the way servers rearrange plates when she reaches for one, in a toast that turns to a private joke with their eyes. She hears it. She smiles anyway because she's learned to protect herself with grace. But when a cousin, loud, confident, the kind who mistakes entitlement for wit, throws his head back and offers a line about being charitable for marrying someone from the other side, something inside her breaks. That night, in the privacy of the bridal suite, she does something she hasn't done in a long time. She lets the anger out. She smooths the dress she paid for with her own money, the small silk label a secret reminder of how she got here. She remembers the long hours, the scholarships, the late nights negotiating contracts over cheap coffee. She thinks about the moment he first called and asked her to dinner, the way he listened like he was discovering a radio station no one else had heard. He loved the version of her that fit his picture. He didn't love the rest. She doesn't call him a liar. She calls him a choice. She decides she won't become a warning for other women. She will become a story that complicates the world they've tried to keep neat. 2 days later, she walks into his family's boardroom for what everyone assumes will be a photo op. The groom's father runs a conglomerate, real estate, hospitals, the kind of name that makes headlines. A $950 million merger hangs between them like an expectation no one dares to question. The press knows about the deal. Investors have been briefed and quietly celebrated. In the gossip columns, the wedding was always the end of a narrative arc, the moment two dynasties merge and everyone cheers. They don't expect her to speak at that meeting. They expect her to be silent, to hand over the ceremonial pen for the signatures and smile for the cameras. They don't know that she has spent the past year building something of her own. A tech startup that began in her apartment, then a series of small angel investments, then a partnership with a venture that values innovation more than pedigree. Her company is not yet public, but its contracts are real. Its patents are real. Its investors are the kind who trust numbers, not names. She enters the room in the same dress she wore to the altar, intentional, calculated. When the room hushes, she does not look to her new husband. She looks at the group of men who have been measuring her worth in downplayed insults and raises a hand to stop the CEO as he begins with the expected platitudes. This is not just a celebration of family, she says, voice steady. This is a celebration of transactions. And transactions require transparency. A ripple of surprise moves across the table. The PR director checks his phone. The patriarch gives her a look like a man who has just discovered a loose tooth in a crown. She speaks slowly, unfolding a story not about the dinner party but about the money that has become their shared language. She tells them that the $950 million merger they boast about is being held in escrow pending a final legal review. She tells them that as part of the due diligence, the acquisition target requested verification of certain minority-led partnerships and community initiatives that the conglomerate had publicized but never actually implemented. A gasp. Someone mutters that it's ridiculous. She keeps going. And it seems, she says, that in the course of that review discrepancies were found. Documents that were meant to represent community investment resolve were either poorly executed or never initiated. In short, There are misrepresentations that reduce the value of the merger. They look at each other. The patriarch's jaw tightens. On what grounds? He asks. She slides a folder across the table. It's not a theatrical move, it's business. Inside are invoices, emails, timestamps, recorded meetings. Not everything is damning, yet. But it's enough to give their lawyers pause. Enough to make the external auditors slow their pens. Enough to turn the $950 million headline into a question mark. You were all so eager to ask me to be family, she says. But no one bothered asking what I was. That silence was assumed to be convenience. The room erupts. The son pleads. The PR director whispers about a scandal. The conservative board members count their options. We can fix this, someone says. We can reframe. She shakes her head. No, she says. You don't get to drag me into a narrative that profits from my silence. In the lobby, cameras are starting to gather. Word travels fast when dynasties are threatened. Outside, the city hums and the stock market readouts flicker. They hold their breath like people waiting for a verdict. Inside, she signs a single paper, a legal instrument that withholds her consent, her endorsement, and her presence from any PR statements, and that places several clauses into the due diligence report. It's a small paper in a big pile, but the legal wording is tight and it forces a pause in the merger. They accuse her of melodrama, of ambition. They call her reckless. A cousin posts a thinly veiled tweet that alludes to temper tantrums in high places. The groom sits in their shared apartment, stunned and pleading. He didn't sign on for this kind of war. He wanted a quiet life wrapped in their old money, and she had wanted love. They both wanted different things without ever admitting it aloud. But elsewhere in conference rooms and investment firms, the shift is real. Lawyers unfurl contracts like maps. Bankers pick apart forecasts. Analysts sniff for a weakness they can turn into leverage. The $950 million headline is no longer just headline. It's an open wound that will be carefully examined. There is a simpler truth underneath the corporate maneuvers. She didn't cancel the deal because she wanted to spite them. She canceled it because she realized her name was being used as a badge without the substance to back it up. They had courted her presence to make their family look more diverse, more modern, more philanthropic, but they had never actually opened financial doors to people who looked like her. Their promises were polished for the cameras, not lived in the spreadsheets. She gives interviews. Not the glossy, rehearsed statements that say, "We're working through this." She sits with reporters who actually ask hard questions about the community investments that never happened, about the disparity between public statements and private ledgers, about how mergers can sometimes be mirrors held up to the moral inconsistencies of the people who sign them. The public loves a reckoning. It is easier to cheer when accountability is a spectacle. Her story becomes a headline, the bride who stopped a massive merger. Some call her brave, some call her vindictive. Investors adjust their positions. The patriarch is forced to answer to a board he's always assumed would follow him without question. The groom, who had expected to inherit a future paved by other people's work, realizes he has a choice: to stand with the people who raised him in a culture of unspoken entitlement, or to stand with the woman who has just taught him how to translate morals into action. He hesitates. The cameras do not. In the end, he chooses poorly at first. He tries to smooth things over, to bridge worlds with a press release full of vague promises. But she refuses to be a bridge built on pretense. She wants structures changed, not optics. She tells him in a voice that lashes like a rope, "If you want someone who will hold the brand while it burns, you're in the wrong marriage." That line makes every gossip column hungry. It is cruel, perhaps, and it is honest. Months pass. The deal unravels as investigations into the misrepresented investments deepen. Board members step down. The conglomerate spends millions on legal fees and PR repairs. The patriarch tries to salvage his legacy. He begins to make the very donations and community programs he once faked on paper. But the narrative has shifted. People pay attention now. People ask tougher questions about how wealth is built and marketed. Her company, meanwhile, grows in the quiet way of businesses that deliver results. Investors who once asked for her as a prop now ask to fund her. She takes money from sources that believe in measurable impact, not just good optics. She sponsors programs that actually exist: scholarships, mentorship, tech incubators in neighborhoods that banks had long ignored. She does it with surgical intention, the way she once curated a dress, now curating policy and practice instead of appearances. Sometimes she thinks about their wedding day, about the way the groom's mother folded her hands and smiled like a queen granting favor. She thinks about the way his family tried to place her into a checklist designed to reassure strangers that their dynasty had evolved. She doesn't miss them. She misses the small moments with him, coffee on a Sunday, the way he laughed without calculating the cost. One afternoon, months after the cancellation made global headlines, she receives a message from him. It's short. Can we talk? It reads like someone knocking at a locked door. She replies with a question. About what? About us, he writes. She thinks about forgiveness, how it differs from forgetting, how it must be earned. She thinks about vows and promises and whether those should be kept when the people who made them did not keep the world honest. She goes to the cafe they used to share. He is there, looking like someone who has read the long list of mistakes and is trying to pay them back in small coins. He asks for a second chance to learn, to listen, to be better. He admits he was cowardly, that he let his family shape his choices, that he had been afraid to see what was true. She listens. Her expression is soft but firm. She loves the man she married, perhaps still. But this is not a fairy tale where love fixes what's broken. She tells him she will consider it, not as mercy but as accountability. If you're going to be in my life, she says, you have to join me in the work. They begin slowly. Not with grand declarations but with everyday choices. He volunteers at one of her programs. He sits in meetings he once would have skipped. He listens when she tells him how words and contracts have power, and how that power should be used with care. The world watches because it likes resumes of redemption. Some cheer them on, others remain suspicious. It doesn't matter. The change they've started ripples outward. The conglomerate reforms, the community programs receive sustained funding. Young entrepreneurs see a woman who refused to be a prop and instead became an architect. On a chilly fall morning 2 years later, they host a small ceremony at a neighborhood community center, a place her company helped fund. It's not the gala of the old family, but in terms of meaning it's immeasurably richer. The patriarch attends, not as a king but as a man who has learned that legacy needs work. He shakes hands with people he once ignored. When the crowd disperses, he finds her alone by the doors, watching young students file into a coding class. He asks quietly, "Are you happy?" She looks at the room, at the laughter, at the lines of code being typed by hands that used to be overlooked. She thinks about the $950 million headline that once threatened to define her. She thinks about the people who laughed at her at the altar, and how their laughter now sounds small. "I'm busy," she says, smiling. "And that is enough." He nods, and for the first time the nod is not pitying. It is grateful. The cameras never had the whole story. They only had the flash. But the work she chose to do after the flash is what will last. And that is the kind of victory that cannot be cancelled by a headline.